everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I know we have a lot of people registered today, so I'm just going to give people a few more minutes to join. Well, a few more seconds, I should say. So welcome to the CICan Impact Climate workshop on the Campus Living Labs. We'll just give just another 10, 15 seconds for people to arrive. We have a number of people registered, so I'm just going to give us a couple more minutes. And okay. I would like to welcome everyone to CICan's Impact Climate Project Workshop to promote our upcoming best practices for Campus Living Labs Volume 2 report. Today, we're proud to present members from our cohorts 1 and 2 for a workshop on best practices for net zero and ReconciliACTION. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. So please add your land and territory acknowledgement in the chat, and I'm just going to provide the one for CICan. CICan acknowledges that our office is located in Ottawa. Oh, and also, please, if people can just mute themselves, I'm just gonna mute. Okay, sorry about that. CICan acknowledges that our offices located in Ottawa are on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. CICan recognizes the Algonquins as the customary keepers and defenders of the Ottawa River watershed and its tributaries. We honor their long history of welcoming many nations to this beautiful territory and uphold and uplift the voice and values of our host nation. Further, CICan respects and affirms the inherent and treaty rights of all Indigenous peoples across this land. CICan has and will continue to honor the commitments to self-determination and sovereignty we have made to Indigenous nations and peoples. CICan acknowledges the historical and ongoing oppression of lands, cultures, and the original peoples in what we now know as Canada, and fervently believe that education contributes to the healing and decolonizing journey that we all share together. Sorry. I realized I was not sharing my screen. Thank you, Letitia. So, with that, I would like to introduce our presenters, speakers today. I'm your host today on behalf of CICan. My name is Sandra Eisman, and I'm the Senior Program Officer at the Impact Climate Project. I'm joined by 4 presenters from 3 member colleges. First, we will hear from Bradie Granger from Cambrian College in Ontario, presenting on their project that at the core focuses on Indigenous knowledges and practices. And then we'll hear from Volker Schmid from Saskatchewan Polytechnic in Saskatchewan, presenting on a project that was foremost on waste. And for our final Campus Living Lab, we'll learn about John Abbott College's project that focused primarily on green building and lands management, as well as Indigenous perspectives and knowledges, presented by Chris Levesque and Shannon Coulter. But first, I'd like to briefly share our findings and give you a quick introduction regarding what makes a Campus Living Lab and how our members found success in their projects. And it is our hope that you and your college will be inspired to start your own Campus Living Lab. While this is the final cohort in our project, we are seeking out ways to fund more Campus Living Labs, and we are also publishing our Volume 2 of best practices in the next couple of weeks. And we're hoping that this will provide enough of a resource for you to start your own Campus Living Lab, even if we're not able to fund a cohort for it. Although, fingers crossed, we're hoping we can. So if you'd like to see our report, you can view, if you'd like to see our first report, you can view from the link that Letitia will add right now. And I understand there are people kind of getting stuck in the lobby, so it might just take her a moment because I know she's kind of switching between admitting people and getting links ready. And I'd just like to briefly introduce why campus living labs. So climate change, as we all know, is extremely complex and it's difficult for so many reasons. It creates so many complex geophysical changes, which further contribute to a complex feedback loop system. This makes it very difficult to predict. It involves many complex systems altering behaviors of different organisms, all with a role to play, making it difficult to comprehend. It touches on so many different and complex types of sciences, so it's difficult to communicate, especially when it comes to communication to the layperson who's not an expert in one of these scientific areas. The impacts and solutions are embedded in complex geopolitical and socioeconomic systems, making it extremely difficult to solve on any large scale. And lastly, it's so complex due to its vastness and pervasiveness, it makes it difficult for us to understand as individuals how and where we fit in regards to our own contributions to climate change and where we can implement solutions. But just because it's wicked or inherently complicated, it doesn't mean we shouldn't try. So the campus living labs not only offer a relatively affordable option for implementing greenhouse gas reducing activities on campus, but they call on wide campus participation, which means that this collective engagement can influence individual behavior. This bridge from climate grief to climate action helps us map out a path forward for individuals, making climate change just a little bit less wicked for all of us. So in order to try to help further simplify this path forward for climate action, projects are categorized by 5 themes, but we also encourage people to touch on multiple themes for a more circular approach to greenhouse gas reductions. For example, projects may have the primary focus of waste, but will oftentimes also focus on food. And they'll look at ways to reduce waste when it comes to food as a preemptive approach, such as through reducing portion size or introducing reusable food containers, or even looking at composting options, as we'll hear. This type of approach is called circularity, and it examines reducing waste upstream and downstream from the main point of focus. So you may be asking, where do campus living labs fit in? Well, campus living labs enable our members to experiment with solutions by piloting or expanding on concepts that draw on a variety of initiatives or bring in multiple collaborators, or it could be introducing new technology or concepts not really used pervasively yet. The labs from Cohort 1 provided us with many wonderful lessons that we tried to further support with Cohort 2. And from Cohort 2, we saw a deepening of these lessons, bringing about even more success in greenhouse gas reductions and awareness raising. This resulted in greater climate action and ReconciliACTION. So why campus living labs? Because as a post-secondary sector with more than 700 campuses across Canada, with over 95% of Canadians, including more than 86% of Indigenous peoples, living within 50 kilometers of one of our members, our potential to foster real change at the college and individual level is immense. With 15 out of 20 of our projects able to measure their greenhouse gases during their project year, we found a collective action of greenhouse gases reduced by 34 metric tons. And when we include the carbon sequestration from some of the projects that were around maintaining trees or looking at longevity of tree planting, we were able to prevent 1,234 metric tons of CO2 equivalent from entering the atmosphere or sequestration. So imagine projects like this across all campuses. The combined action of overall carbon reduction is something really worth investing in. And with 20 out of our projects, so not everyone was able to measure their GHGs in the projects in the first year or two, because maybe they were waiting for the project to mature or the way it was set up. But everyone was able to measure their engagement to some degree, and we did find that with these projects in their year of operation, it resulted in a combined close to 3.4 million interactions. So in Cohort 2, people engage with people in person in almost 18,800 interactions and at least 2.7 million online or in media interactions. So again, imagine projects like these across all campuses, the combined engagement and potential for behavior change is really something worth investing in. So I'd like to now play a couple of videos of cohort 2. We're just going to play 1 to 2 minutes. We're not going to play the full videos. If you're interested in seeing the full videos so that you can learn more about what their campus living lab was, we will be sharing the links, and they will be also accessible when we share the recording, the slides, and the workbook that we're going to be sharing with you as well. So we'll just start with the first video, and please someone let me know if it's not audible.
In the heart of the West Kootenays, one small community college is taking an innovative approach to organic waste diversion.
As a signatory on the Sustainable Development Goals Accord and the Race to Zero, Selkirk College is committed to reducing its carbon footprint with a pledge of net zero by 2030.
6% of global greenhouse gas emissions are caused by food waste rotting in landfills, which produces methane, a potent greenhouse gas with more than 28 times the global warming potential of CO2. Food waste also reduces the lifespan of landfills by taking up valuable space.
Regionally, our landfills have limited lifespans and capacities, and so everything we can do to keep divertible materials like organic wastes out of landfills is super important, including using things like food cyclers or green bin programs or any of those other actions that help us to make those changes. Within the RDCK, we've now constructed 2 composting facilities and upgraded 4 transfer stations to accept organic waste separated from garbage. So that means anyone can bring organic waste into our facilities, either if you have a green bin program, or you use a food cycler, or are a commercial operation that has organic waste. You can use our facilities and bring that material to us at a reduced cost from mixed waste. And we process that material into compost by mixing it with food waste and wood waste, and we turn it into compost.
Building off a partnership with the City of Nelson on their pilot pre-treated organics program, and with funding support from Colleges and Institutes Canada and their Impact Climate Campus Living Labs program, the college is testing a new technology to divert organic waste, the food cycler. The food cycler is a composting alternative that dehydrates and grinds food waste, reducing its volume by up to 90%.
Now we'll just hear a quick video from Dawson College.
In 2023, as a part of a CICan Impact National Demonstration Project, Dawson purchased 20,000 red wiggler worms to help chew through organic waste produced by the college cafeteria. This project will add to the 52 tons of organic waste composted in recycling stations throughout the college that reduce our greenhouse gases by 19 tons. The worms eat organic waste such as non-meat food scraps, cardboard, and paper towels in specially designed worm bins. Their droppings, called worm castings, are a high-grade fertilizer that will be harvested by volunteers and used in the rooftop gardens, as well as a newly established native plant nursery. This waste-to-food process produces vegetables that are sold at the weekly Dawson market or donated to a local organization dealing with individuals who are houseless. Using worms demonstrates a nature-based solution and furthers Dawson Living Campus objectives to reconnect people, community, and nature.
And one final, we'll just hear 1 or 2 minutes from Canador's video, where they actually provide a bit of an explanation about their campus, their Living Labs project from cohort 1 and cohort 2.
In May 2022, Colleges and Institutes Canada put a call out for submissions to their Impact Climate Initiative. This called on colleges and institutes to develop projects to reduce greenhouse gas emissions on their campuses. At the time, Canada was looking to expand research to improve food sovereignty for rural and Indigenous communities. Our proposal focused on using our off-grid grow pod to explore opportunities to reduce embodied carbon associated with production and procurement as a climate-resistant solution for food sovereignty. It also provided us with an opportunity to consult with the Indigenous community to better understand their needs and circumstances. For the second consecutive year, Canada was honored to be selected by Colleges and Institutes Canada as one of 10 nationwide living labs. Building off the success of our first project, we shifted our focus to the 650 acres of forested land at our College Drive campus. Land that includes trail systems, streams, a variety of plants and animals, and endless biodiversity to support research for our students. As such, we wanted to assess its health and create a 10-year forest management plan to protect it going forward. Over the last 10 months, we've collaborated with staff, students, and community partners to connect them to the forest as part of our Living Labs project.
Great, thank you. So again, we'll be sharing the links to those videos. So I know that there was a lot of wonderful information that they shared, and you will have access to that. Now, I'd like to introduce a fun exercise for you to participate in today. We hope that we'll be able to help you get started with your own campus living lab using this exercise and workbook that we'll be sharing later. Letitia will be sharing the link with you now, and you can take a look at it. We won't look at it as a group yet. We'll look at it as a group at the end of the presentations and try to go through it a little bit to see if we can troubleshoot some problems together. And you can get a little taste of what it's like to be in a campus living lab project group in sort of benefiting from that peer knowledge sharing exercise that we would engage in. So we have filled in the exercise sheet a little bit with some of our panelists' projects, and we're inviting you to add your own project ideas. If you have any questions, again, we'll work on it together as a group. We're also taking emails from anyone interested in joining a potential cohort 4. We have a wish list going. So we're currently looking for funding at this time. We don't have it yet, but we are looking for it. So if you don't want other people to see your email address, that's okay. Just send us an email at impact@cican.org and let us know that you would like to be added to a wish list that we will not disclose with anyone else. So, and also please don't forget to look for our upcoming report. It will be coming out sometime in October 2024, and it will be volume 2 of our best practices. So it'll elaborate or sort of go on and bring us to the next level of lessons learned from cohort 2. So we'll now move on to our presentations. If you have any questions, please feel free to add your questions in the chat. We will address all questions at the end of all 3 presentations. But in the meantime, our presenters can add their answers in the chat if they feel like, but also we will ask all panelists at the end. So first, I would like to introduce Bradie Granger from Cambrian. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Bradie Granger, or my Indigenous name is Gish Gwandag Nimkeed. I am from Sudbury, Ontario, where Cambrian College is located. And my project is looking at outdoor Indigenous learning spaces here at the college. You can go to next, Sandra. I was part of cohort 1, and what we did was we wanted to do this for a very long time, to create an outdoor learning space, very Indigenous focused. And just what to expect today, I'm just going to take you through where did this idea come from, our process of collaboration, because it was indeed very collaborative in nature, and to look at the actual living lab. Our living lab is still going today, still expanding its use, and I can explain some of that, as well as the relationship to sustainability and our next steps. So the project lasted for cohort 1, but then we've been continuing to expand and utilize the space. Next. So why did we want to look at an outdoor learning space as our living lab? We do have a very high number of Indigenous students. So we have about 600 Indigenous students here at the college on a daily basis. And we have a very strong connection to our 13 direct communities right around Sudbury, but also all of the Northern Ontario, of which there's many, many, many Indigenous communities that we draw from. As part of our strategic plan, we've always had a pillar related to Indigenous education, reconciliation, decolonization. And as part of that, we wanted to expand our classrooms. So inside the college, we do have 2 Indigenous themed classrooms, but we wanted to expand the learning spaces outside of that and taking the learning outside to nature, to our surrounding areas. We are in the north, so we do require a 4-season space. As you know, the typical school year lasts September to April, the end of April. So during that time, there are many, many very cold months. So we wanted to make sure that we were building a space that we could utilize 12 months of the year. We do have a lot of Indigenous content in courses and programs, and they really needed somewhere to host instruction in a land-based way. We want to focus on land-based instruction. Doing that, we need to be outside. So again, that was another one of the reasons. And many of our programs, especially in my area, so I'm the chair for the Schools of Interdisciplinary Studies and Public Safety, but also I'm directly related to community services. And many of those programs, as well as our health programs, wanted an outdoor classroom. And I put quotations around it because we don't like using the word classroom as Indigenous folks because it's colonial. But they really wanted to have an outdoor space, kind of like what they've been doing across the country in the K-12 system, where they're building outdoor learning spaces for classrooms and students to go and utilize and learn from. Next. So what did we do? We had this idea. We did some research on all of the best practices of outdoor learning spaces. We had many, many, many discussions. We did a lot of listening. We did a lot of collaboration with both internal folks as well as external partners. In the college, we have our Indigenous Student Support Center called Wabanode. We have many Indigenous faculty, students, myself, other staff members, and we met with them to determine what would be the ideal. We also met with facilities management and security to scope out the area because we really wanted to make it a safe space as well as an accessible space. So we discovered that wasn't easy. Where we really wanted the ideal spot, it would cost us way too much money in order to build it there to make it accessible. But we had already a sacred arbor that is accessible. So we started surrounding the conversation around maybe we should augment that space. And that's where we actually landed. It did start over conversation in consultation with all of the community members, but in the end, we kept it internal and worked out the details with all of our internal partners. Next, please. So again, our Sacred Arbor did become the chosen area. It is accessible, the needs of all of our programs and courses. It is a safe location. It has been augmented even further since then. The consultation, read next steps, and build occurred after that. And then we also wanted to incorporate teachings from knowledge keepers, from our elders regarding Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing. Our elders in residence recorded some videos to be used before classes utilize the space in case they weren't available. So they're not here 12 months a year and they're only here part-time because they have other activities that they participate in the community, but we wanted those teachings available. So before a class goes in, there's a quick video or a lesson teaching from the elders about sustainability and why outdoor learning is important. We also created some pre and post surveys to determine the Indigenous learning related specifically to sustainability, climate change, and the way we view Shkogmakwe, which is Mother Earth in Ojibwe. So taking all of that, we created our living lab. So our build included the following, and I do have some photos in the next slide to show you. We brought power to the outside of our arbor. The power is very inconspicuous, so you don't know it's there. There is wireless internet available, again, inconspicuous, so you don't know that it's there. The outdoor construction to help with drafts in the winter, which included some cushions for warmth, laptop holders for laps purchased. We also got blankets so that folks can stay warm. We have a 4-season screen and ultra short throw projector. The projector does stay inside, but we take it back and forth. We created cedar walls. These were upgraded. We did have them, but they were very drafty. So unless we had a sacred fire going, it was extremely cold in the winter. So we upgraded those to help with drafts, and we built a shed to hold all of the items. They were all built in traditional Indigenous ways. So for example, our cedar was planed and cut using traditional tools. No power tools were used in this upgraded construction. The original arbor was built with power tools, unfortunately, but at least the upgrades were used. We used traditional tools. We also have a medicine garden included with a trail around the site depicting sacred medicines. We have many, many sacred medicines just naturally growing. We do a lot of medicine walks and medicine tours. And we also have some medicines that our Indigenous communities rely on built in the garden. So our cedar, sweetgrass, sage, and oh my goodness, I forgot the fourth one already. Anyway, we focused on minimal disruption to the area, but we wanted to ensure accessibility was still present. So our cedar was from a felled tree used for the window frames, which was great. We also added more cedar trees around the area so that the sound barrier would be increased as the years went on. Next, please. Oh, photos. So that's our sacred arbor in the winter. Well, for many of the months of the year, unfortunately, here in Northern Ontario. There are more cedar trees after this picture as well to insulate the area. Next photo. That's the shed we built. And finally, our medicine garden is right there. So you can see the cedar there in the winter, but the other 3 medicines do grow there during the rest of the year. We're just harvesting right now. So since it's been completed, we have hired 2 Indigenous specific positions here at the college, and all of our interviews were conducted in the arbor. So it made for a very different atmosphere in terms of job interview skills, which was actually quite fantastic for those positions. We do have a focus on sustainability via our strategic plan, which continues. And we continue developing lessons through our cultural facilitator, our elders. We do have classes conducted in the arbor. We have ceremonies held there. So it's a very multi-purpose area, but as a living lab, it really promotes ReconciliACTION for sure. We continue to build upon the trail in behind the arbor and around campus, identifying the various medicines and Indigenous knowledge pieces. And of course, we continue to focus on sustainability through an Indigenous lens throughout the campus. And that's all I have. Thank you, Sandra. Miigwech.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Bradie. That was a really wonderful presentation. Thanks for kicking us off, cohort 1. And
cohort 1.
Yeah. And now we'll move on to our first presentation from cohort 2. So I'd like to introduce Volker Schmid from Saskatchewan Polytechnic. He's presenting on waste. Our cohort 2 was waste heavy. There was a lot of focus on that. So thank you, Volker, for presenting.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Volker Schmid, located in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, with Saskatchewan Polytechnic. And yeah, first of all, credit where credit is due. We did actually collaborate with Selkirk and Dawson, where you saw some videos previously, because our projects were so similar. It was about processing food waste from our cafeteria kitchens away from the landfill, and hopefully reduce greenhouse gas emissions that way. With that, let's go to the presentation. I want to start with our land acknowledgement. Saskatchewan Polytechnic has 4 campuses, which are situated on Treaty 4 and Treaty 6 territories, and the ancestral lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota peoples, and the traditional homeland of the Métis people. Next slide, please. So the question we had was, is on-site composting feasible for colleges and other institutional or industrial facilities? The problem here in Prince Albert was that we do not have a municipal composting system. In other jurisdictions that may be different, but here our kitchen scraps went in the garbage. That was the situation. So, and once we got the funding from CICan, we felt like we could do something about that. And with that, let's go to the next slide. So what was the hope? The hope was to divert our commercial kitchen waste away from the landfill and that way reduce greenhouse gas emissions and in the process produce valuable compost and soil amendments. And then we also developed a toolkit for other institutions to reduce food processing waste where that may be feasible or where municipal composting services don't exist. Say, if you have a loggers camp somewhere up north or in the oil field or so, you know, you can still do this kind of stuff. And you don't have to have a commercial kitchen for it. If you just have a business with a coffee room where people have lunch or breakfast or whatever, and there's some plant-based kitchen waste coming out of, you can always do the composting, and the toolkit outlines what kind of composting system may be feasible to your situation. And of course, long-term climate action was a major goal here. Next slide, please. So this is where it started. This is our worm shed and a bucket full of 5 kilos of worms. That was at the time all we could get, half a bucket of worms, including substrate. So we did hire, because my background is in forestry, so I'm not exactly a composting expert. So the CICan funding allowed us to hire a composting expert, Carrie Sapsford, and she organized the worms, and we had the worm shed ready here. And so we got this project started about 6 weeks before the campus would open up again. And with it the kitchen, but we knew that our 5 kilos of worms aren't gonna digest all the food that comes out of. So yeah, all as researchers here, we brought our own kitchen scraps from home, hoping that we would be able to increase the worm population that way and then be ready by the time the kitchen here opens up. So yeah, at the end of the day, the feed rate or the processing abilities of our worms were still a little lower than what came out of the kitchen. Next slide, please. This is what the worm shed looks from the inside. Starts with that hungry bin on the left. And there was just worms in there, a bunch of cardboard and the food scraps. And the worms can eat their own weight in food in 1 to 2 days. But again, 5 kilos was not quite sufficient. The worm population was increasing at the time. But again, we couldn't quite make it. Next slide, please. The cool thing was that this project made some waves, and we were approached by a company called Brew Nature. And they had just developed a prototype in-vessel composting system where the compost is made in batches in a hot vessel. Think about it like a heated concrete mixer. You put just a whole bunch of the stuff in there, some carbon-rich material too, like sawdust, carbon-rich stuff. And then he had a secret sauce there, which is secret apparently, It's a white powder which contains all kinds of fungi and microbiota. That in-vessel composting system could handle quite a larger amount initially anyways than our worms could. And how it works is you put the stuff in there, it processes it within a work week, then you take it out and then you let it cure for 14 days, and afterwards you have really nice compost. For the vermicomposting shed, we went the route with red wiggler worms, as I mentioned before, and try to grow it. Next slide, please. The challenges with both. In both cases, it was the space. We had to find a spot for it, and we were lucky on the vermicomposting front that we had our little worm shed set aside. But for in-vessel, that came a little bit unplanned. We had to ask shipping and receiving to dedicate a little corner of their forklift garage for us. And that had, that was a little tough to get by in at first, but then they warmed up to the idea. On the in-vessel side of things, we had to install another plugin because a regular plugin would just not be enough. So there was a little bit of initial cost there. And then it was a prototype. So there were a few kinks to work out. And the biggest one was that the air inlet, you have to imagine it's this concrete mixer, and there's an air blower that's supposed to blow air in there every 45 minutes or so in order to avoid an anaerobic situation again. And this inlet was sitting on the very bottom of it. So the material just clogged it. And then, we ran exactly into these anaerobic conditions where we had to deal with excess moisture and a bit of a smell. And then, once it got cold, it gets pretty steamy, right? So the problem was that when the forklift operator opened the garage, he got hit with this stinky cloud of steam, and they were not very impressed by that. So I guess in the name of science, right? So the prototype has now improved, and that is not an issue anymore. It was just a matter of placing the air inlet a little bit higher on the side. That was all it took. For the vermicomposting, the worm population grew a little bit slower than we were hoping. And then it's also a little bit more staff intensive than the in-vessel composting system. So we were looking around the student body for volunteers, and how we went about it was we called it cookie day. So we purposely placed that on Friday night, so we knew that only the keeners would show up, and asked who would be voluntarily participating in something like that. And we did find 3 volunteers. One skipped out halfway through, but the other 2 stuck around and were really, really instrumental in this. Low temperatures were a problem. We are in Saskatchewan, and around Christmas, January, we do hit the -30 mark. And even though we had a space heater in the shed, which managed to keep the temperature in the pluses, but once the temperature in the shed fell below +7 degrees, the worms really slowed down. That was quite evident, which was not a problem with in-vessel. So our volunteer Carly, she noticed this and just took all the worm bins and rescued them and put them in her own basement over the Christmas break so the worms wouldn't freeze. So that's dedication, and it's worth something. And at this point, I might add that just on a voluntary basis, the program is currently still going based on her, which is awesome. And then obviously, training of kitchen staff was a challenge, though they were quite receptive. they said, yeah, they think it's a great idea, but they didn't want to take on a leadership position in it. However, our volunteer Carly certainly was, and she came up with a system. It's really just a bucket on the left, a bucket on the right, and all the kitchen staff has to do is put the foods, the plant-based scraps in one bucket, meat stuff in the other, and that's how it's separated. Next slide, please. Greenhouse gas reduction goals. Obviously, we tried to divert all our food scraps away from the landfill, but in fact, we only were successful at about 2/3 of it, 62%, including the in-vessel stuff. That added up to 420 kilos of kitchen scraps diverted away from the landfill. And the goal was to prevent the methane emissions that would result from an anaerobic decomposition of food waste once it was buried in the landfill. So there's a bit of a formula I put in here I don't want to bother you with, but if we assume that methane is a 28 times more potent greenhouse gas than CO2, then we're looking at almost half a ton, 4,880 kilos of CO2 equivalent sequestered by not throwing our kitchen scraps just in the garbage, but composting it. Next slide, please. There's Carrie. She was our hired gun for this project. And she had, on April 25th, we had what we call Sustainability Day here on campus, where she then just handed out our compost to students, to staff. They all could take it home, and it was the perfect time of year where everybody was starting to have their own gardens and that kind of thing. So I guess that's our circularity aspect of the whole project, and it'll help with the outreach too. And Carrie also did some compost knowledge surveys among Sask Poly students and staff, hosted a composting workshop, and we also presented at the CICan Applied Research Symposium in Ottawa, where we actually met Letitia. That was a treat. So next slide, please. So overall, this project really was a home run, and it even culminated in getting an RCE award. That's the Regional Center of Expertise award. So if you look at that picture here, that's me on the left, then Carrie holding her well-deserved award, and our Lieutenant Governor, Mr. Mirasti. Next slide, please. So in order for, on the outreach front, we did, as I mentioned earlier, come up with this Sustaina Cucina on-site composting toolkit, which we have distributed to a few other colleges that had showed interest based on our presentation in Ottawa. And again, if you have any other commercial kitchen, this toolkit can really give you a good route to pursue if you are looking into composting your kitchen scraps. So the outcome of the research was that on-site composting is feasible and possible, and the toolkit promoted to institutions and industrial facilities that are interested in starting and operating a composting system to handle their food waste. Next slide, please. So here are our sustainable development goals, and the biggest one was number 13, climate action, but a whole bunch of other ones were also addressed in the process, just by helping institutions with their industrial-sized kitchen waste to implement on-site composting systems and divert food scraps away from landfills, turning food waste into valuable soil amendments, actively decreasing GHG emissions, and promoting soil health. Next slide, please. That was it from me then. So if you guys have any questions, please shoot.
Thank you so much, Volker. That was a wonderful dive into what you did with vermicomposting and a nice comparison with the in-vessel composting. So thank you so much for sharing that. And again, if you have questions, please add them to the chat and our presenters can answer them in the chat, and we will save all verbal questions for the end of the presentations. So next up, I would like to welcome John Abbott College. We have Shannon Coulter-Low and Chris Levesque presenting. Thank you.
All right, so thanks, Sandra. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Okay. I just want to make sure that Chris is here.
I'm here, Shannon. Hi,
Okay.
everyone.
Great. Okay, so hi, everyone. I have two different screens, so if I'm not looking at you, it's because I'm looking at my other screen. So I want to start with doing a land acknowledgement. So Chris and I are from John Abbott College. I want to acknowledge that we are on an unceded Indigenous lands of the traditional territory of both the Kanien'kehá:ka, Mohawk, and the Anishinaabe Algonquin peoples. So this is our land-based learning project. This project is the result of two ideas which came together, I think, in a really beautiful way to form one project. So there was an idea floating around for a couple of years to create a medicine garden or an Indigenous garden on campus for our Indigenous students and for others to learn about Indigenous traditions. And then we received a call from CICan's Campus Living Labs funds. And Chris emailed me and said, well, why don't we do a microforest project? So we had two projects and we decided to combine them into one. And you'll see in the pictures later on, there's two sites that are right next to each other. And this has been a really fantastic experience. I can speak for myself, of collaboration between departments and consultation, working with students and employees and Indigenous knowledge keepers and with our Indigenous students. So the project launched in June 2023. I believe that was when our first consultation was done. And then it was completed actually just a few weeks ago, and we had our opening ceremony on Friday. So you can go to the next slide. Okay, perfect. So like I mentioned, there are two sites, and what we wanted to do was braid together the Indigenous knowledge with the Western science in order to address the climate and ecological crisis. So we wanted to improve knowledge and practices concerning our environment by having an outdoor site where students can come and learn off the land, increase awareness of the ways to combat climate change and to take care of the planet, directly act to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So Chris will talk later on about how we're trapping carbon in the soil, and enhance our biodiversity on campus. We have a really big campus, our beautiful campus grounds, but it's a lot of grass. So we wanted to see if there was a way where we could increase the number of the species of plants, flora and fauna that are on our campus. And then finally, create a space for students to respond to eco-anxiety by working together to take meaningful action. We had a lot of student volunteers help to plant the trees, as you can see in the picture here. And we know that there's been a lot of research done recently on how being outdoors and interacting with the natural world can really help people's mental health. So I'll pass it over to Chris.
Yes, thanks, Shannon. Can you all hear me all right?
Good.
We can.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So as Shannon said, our project is made of two components that are integrated, I think fully integrated at this point. And we're trying to reach the various objectives that Shannon was talking about on the previous slide with these two projects. So one of the components is the microforest. We planted 600 trees in October of last year, so it's been almost a year now. That's 14 native species, and they were planted with the help of students. We had a large cohort of students joining us for that on that beautiful day to plant all of those trees. The microforest is an educational tool, which we'll talk about in more detail just a bit later. But it also addresses the climate and ecological emergency directly by providing various ecosystem services. So it reduces greenhouse gases, traps carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. As Shannon said, it enhances biodiversity on campus. So we're replacing lawn with a very low biodiversity. So we're replacing that with a forest that has several native species, and then it attracts various birds and insects and other pollinators, and both vertebrate and invertebrate animals and mushrooms and so on. The presence of the trees will purify the air and produce oxygen, will retain water, which is can be important in our area that's flood prone. We're very, very close to the lake. We can't see it on that picture, but on the other side of that road that's in the background is the lake, or St. Lawrence River, a fluvial lake, part of the St. Lawrence River. And so retaining water helps to mitigate a little bit the amount of water that reaches the river, especially in the spring or when there's heavy downpours. And finally, the forest locally reduces the heat island effect, so moderates the climate, especially during the heat waves. Next slide, please. The other component of the project is the First Peoples Garden. Ganigon Rio, which means of good mind. So that's the Mohawk name for our garden. We just had on Friday the opening ceremony for the garden, and it was the first time, actually it was the second time technically that it was used, but we had essentially that meeting was the first of, we hope, many meetings. So people were gathered around the central fire pit, and you can see the seating all around. So these are reclaimed ash trees that died of emerald ash borer disease, and we had a fire going on there in the fire pit. The fire pit has representations of First Nations. There are various symbols on the fire pit itself, as well as on the concrete slab in the middle. So various representations of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis nations that are part of our community. And the site is used for Indigenous students and the broader Indigenous community to host ceremonies and events. And it's a place where elders can provide teachings and reflections. And that was certainly the case on Friday during the opening ceremony. But the garden is also open to everyone. It's located directly along with the microforest that you can see in the background there. It's located right in front of our campus in a highly visible, high traffic area. So it's a welcoming place for students, faculty, staff, and visitors to sit down, immerse, and reflect about nature. And we can move to the next slide, and I'll pass the torch to Shannon.
Okay, so I wanted to introduce, or at least mention, our project team. So I think I want to emphasize this because the success of the project is, I think, a direct reflection of how our operations side, our academic side, engagement, administration, if you follow STARS, then you recognize those categories, have worked together. So each of the individuals on the project team represents a different facet of the college. So we had our project manager who really helped move things forward on a very functional level with, getting different bids and contracts and working with the landscape architect and the landscapers as well. We have our Dean of Indigenous Education. I believe we're the only CEGEP who has a Dean of Indigenous Education, and so she was a really integral part of our team, especially when it came to the First Peoples Garden. We have myself, Chris, who is a professor in the biology department, our communications director, who's helped with the signage and making sure that helping to organize the event we had on Friday and making sure that the information is well presented. We had another manager from facilities. And then lastly, but not least, we had a landscape architect who helped us to do the consultation process for the project with our students and employees, and also helped to, at the end of the day, to design the site. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, this is really, this was a co-design process, and you can see on this slide that there's a few different photos from that process. So we had a workshop in the fall, and then, no, sorry, we had a workshop in June of 2023, and then we had another workshop later that fall. And then we were able to, about a year ago, we were able to plant the microforest. And so the idea was that we wanted there to be a sense of ownership, a sense of belonging to the project. We wanted the students, especially, to be able to come back in a few years and say, oh, I built that, or I was a part of that process, or I planted those trees. And I think we did succeed. I mean, now at this point, I estimated we had about 450 students and staff students, faculty, and staff who participated in the whole process. We also, I should mention, we had students from our Indigenous Student Resource Center. We had Indigenous knowledge keepers and elders who participated in that process. And you can see on the left side one of the elders speaking to a group of students. And I think that's what else. I think that's it for that slide. So I'll send it back to Chris.
Thanks. So I was talking a little earlier about how the microforest and the garden are both an educational tool. So they're a very dynamic educational tool where we're trying to bring the perspective of two-eyed seeing when facing the climate and ecological emergency. We've come to the realization that for a lot of the issues that we are facing, Indigenous perspectives in Western science are just using different words and slightly different language to address the same issues and talk about the same or similar types of solutions in many cases. So one way of addressing the climate and ecological emergency within our community is to use the garden and the forest as an area to teach about the cycles of life. So if I start at the bottom of this little cycle there on the slide, our land-based project provides an area for land-based teaching, about respecting the cycle of plant and animal life and how those plants and those animals are being used by Indigenous communities. And users and visitors of the site can ask questions, for example, pertaining to how the plants help the soil, the insects, the birds, how everything is connected in nature, how we human beings are connected to those different components of life, how we're connected to nature, and how we rely on nature. And one of the ultimate goals is to educate our community, so staff, students, faculty, visitors, about the nations that are part of our community that I mentioned earlier, the First Nations, the Inuit, and the Métis. And it's worth mentioning at that point, I think, that we have a website. So there's a QR code on the site. Instead of adding a bunch of several signs, there's one small sign that talks about what this site is about. And then there's a QR code that leads visitors to a web page where that information is provided. So we provide information through a web link to the users or visitors. And as I mentioned earlier as well, we also have events. So there'll be events, for example, smudging every week will take place in the garden. And that provides an opportunity for those kinds of teachings at specific times. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Another way to introduce our community to the climate and ecological emergency is to use the site as a way to teach about science and the science of climate and the science of the environment. So it's the forest and the garden are an area where we can conduct various inquiry-based investigations. So students will be involved in various exercises regarding the importance of biodiversity, regarding the importance of reducing greenhouse gases, and so on. So I have just 4 examples here that we are working on. One is simply monitoring biodiversity during succession. So students will be following every year. There's a small cohort or small group of students who will be following the site and mapping and determining the types of organisms that are found there. We'll have, we call them camera traps or automated cameras as well that we can deploy when the trees are a little bigger to see if there's any large animal that uses the site. We know there are foxes, for example, in the vicinity, so they might be visiting the area. We can also use the site to study the impact of the forest and the microforest on soil diversity and how the soil functions. We have a colleague who is working on a project to measure the effect of contact with nature on stress, especially physiological stress. So our colleague, who's a physiologist, she's actually tried the lab or the experiment a few times already, and it involves having students visit the site and sit in the garden and bathe in nature, and then measuring various physiological markers of stress, blood pressure and cortisol levels and saliva. So it's a fairly high-tech lab. And then she's comparing that with students who are just sitting elsewhere on campus by a parking lot, for example, just to see how immersion in nature can actually make a difference. So that's quite promising. That's really exciting. And then finally, obviously, our one of the main goals of our forest is to remove greenhouse gases, so directly acting to sequester carbon dioxide in the form of plant and soil biomass. Current estimates are 300 to 1,000 kilograms of CO2 per year. That's fairly conservative. And that will be monitored by students taking this this class every year. So a small group of students will keep track every year of how much greenhouse gases has been removed. And by the way, if anybody's interested in knowing more about how we're going to do that, or knowing more about those projected greenhouse gas reduction targets, I'd be happy to chat with them or to provide some more information. And I'll pass it on to Shannon.
Okay, so in closing, I wanted to mention our sponsors. So we started out with funding from CICan through the Impact Project, and that's the Impact Climate Project, and that's really what allowed our project to get off the ground and to be implemented. But we soon realized that we needed more funding as well. So we received funding from WWF Canada, St. Anne de Bellevue, which is our local municipality, TD, Friends of the Environment, our student union, which is SUJAC, raised money at one of their events. And then we had Revolution, which is a co-op that helped to, or that acquired and planted the trees for us. They went out and got funding from a few other funders as well, so that we could plant those trees. So I mean, all in all, on that front, I would say having some initial funding for us, I think, was really important, because it really helped to move the process forward. We had a deadline that we had to achieve, and we also had, I guess, the motivation to say, okay, well, now we have this funding, so we have to do this project, and it needs to be finished by, this and this date. So I think that was really helpful. Without the CICan funding, we definitely would not have completed the project, or at least it would still be, it would have been a much slower process for us. So that's it for me, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Shannon, and Chris. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. Yeah, I think the findings are similar through other projects, that the Campus Living Lab was sort of the incubation, or what have you call it, and we kind of provide almost like seed funding, and then from there people are able to secure more funding, or they're inspired by other cohorts and cohort projects, and they're able to sort of add on additional projects onto the original. So that's really exciting. And it was just also really interesting to see the different projects, especially the ones we showcased today, how they really sort of brought nature onto campus and provided that interaction. And it'll be exciting to see what the results of the social studies research that your campus is doing, Chris and Shannon, because I think like people have studied already the impact of trees on mental and physical health, and it'll be really interesting to see what your findings are, because it sounds like it's taking it to the next level. So thanks everyone for those extremely inspiring, amazing, wonderful projects. We'd like to open the floor up for questions. So I'm having a hard time seeing the chat. I'm going to leave it open for Letitia to let us know about any questions that are in the chat that we can answer, or in the Q&A section.
Actually, for now, so far we don't have any questions.
Okay. I
but
have some questions then from another source. So how have you leveraged the unique setting of your campus living lab to foster collaboration between the different rights holders and partners? This is really important, I find, for all the projects. So if everyone could answer, and also what impacts have these collaborations had on the sustainability outcomes? Or also just what have they added in terms of, expanding on project objectives and goals? So I have a fly. Sorry, everyone. So can we go around? We'll start with Bradie and then Volker, and then Shannon and Chris, if you could answer that question. Thanks.
Can you repeat it, please?
Happily. So how have you leveraged the unique setting of a campus living lab to foster collaboration with the different rights holders and partners, including your, academic research departments, your Indigenous rights holders, your industry partners, students, faculty, the administration, and what impacts have these collaborations had on the sustainability outcomes, as well as the overall outcomes of the projects? How have they expanded on the original concept idea?
For us, we do a lot through collaboration. So we're a smaller institution. So we have about 5,500 students each semester. So collaboration is a little easier for us just because we're able to pull people together very easily and quickly. But we also do it via survey or focus group, or just finding those partners and reaching out to them and inviting them to our space to do those collaboration projects. So I don't know if it was a little bit easier just because we're a little bit smaller, and we have certain community partners that we leverage for different activities. So, and again, Sudbury's, I mean, it's big-ish. It's a city, but everybody knows everybody. It's like a 2-degree separation. So we do have contacts that we rely on and are able to work with. And in terms of students, we do have self-identification processes. So we're able to identify those students and invite them to participate as well as staff.
Fantastic. Thank you. And what about you, Volker? Now, you worked with some other partners beyond what Bradie was working with.
Yeah, on the collaboration side, first of all, we had and still have student volunteers, which is great. Then we had to rope in shipping and receiving, the kitchen staff. And then it had made enough waves that we were actually approached by Pro Nature, that gave, which is an industry partner, and that gave them a great opportunity for prototype testing. So now I think their in-vessel system is actually ready for the market, and I think they've been successful selling those. So I guess in the grand scheme of things, it has an impact if they're managing to sell those units. Last time I checked, they were with Scott Moe, who's our premier. They went all the way to Dubai to market their product. And then on the vermicomposting thing and toolkit side of things, we managed to generate some interest from other colleges in the toolkit itself. And to my knowledge, so far, I haven't heard of any colleges who have actually implemented a composting system on their premises, but the potential is there. had a few takers for our toolkit. So
fantastic, thank you. And what about you and Chris, Chris and Shannon? How have you found bringing in other partners? It sounds like you already had a pretty wide partnership to start with, but yeah, would you like to elaborate on how you found working with others?
Shannon, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could just say I think the nature of the project required us to really work with multiple departments in the college. And for us, because we don't have a very big sustainability department, that was really required in order to make the project happen. So I think it was a really great example of how things could work when we sort of disseminate the sustainability sustainability mandate throughout the school, as opposed to just keeping it siloed in one location. So for me, that was a really, really great thing to see. I don't know, Chris, if you have anything to add.
Sure, I can just add that our approach was co-designed from the beginning. So our idea was to involve the different stakeholders, different players, including teacher staff. Shannon mentioned that, but a lot of people from the college as well as from outside the college as well, into the very design of the project, from the first workshop to come up with ideas to then a second workshop to have a bit more specific ideas. So reaching out to multiple stakeholders and players was an integral part of the development of the project. And one aspect that I particularly appreciate of that is that this is all education. I'm a teacher, I guess, so I think I tend to value the educational value of things, but this involving so many people in the process. Shannon mentioned up to something like 450 people have been involved in this project over the last couple of years. That's education. We're educating people through participation in this project. So we're educating them through Indigenous perspectives and through various ways of addressing climate change and the biodiversity crisis, as well as just more broadly teaching them how you can collaborate, how you can find your voice in a concert of multiple voices that are working together. I find that absolutely beautiful. And I can say that because I don't take credit for that aspect of the project.
Even if you did, though, I think it's still a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yes,
So,
Sandra, if I may, I think just to jump to this question, I think we have a similar questions in the chat from Adriana, that she's curious to know if there is any idea or maybe plans to make the project part of a sort of international partnership, like for each institution that presented today. I don't know if
Yeah, I don't know about international partnership, but a lot of our Indigenous classes are general education electives, so any student can take them. And I do know that they utilize the outdoor learning space to do Indigenous teachings out there. So it's kind of like a reciprocal relationship in a way.
did you have teachers from other countries, I thought, as well? Am I like misremembering that?
Do I have other? No, we have Indigenous teachers through our Indigenous teachers are Indigenous to Turtle Island.
Okay, sorry, pardon me.
Yeah. No, that's okay.
Kidding. And what about you, Volker?
Generally speaking, Sask Polytech absolutely has some collaborations with foreign countries, namely Germany. Now, I guess it's I guess I'm the linkage there. Not so much on the composting front. This is more of a Saskatchewan Polytechnic Prince Albert thing so far. you know, and I hope we can at least reach out to our other campuses in Saskatoon, Moose Jaw, and Regina at some point too, and convince them to get something like that started as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And but Shannon and Chris, you mentioned a connection to Dubai.
Oh, yeah, that was sorry.
Oh, that was
is
you. Sorry.
Dubai. Yeah, that is Brew Nature. They try to sell their product now worldwide, I guess. So I guess yeah, our little prototype we had here may, you know, help them to reach out a little bit internationally as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And what about you, Shannon and Chris? Any plans to expand internationally or partner with international people?
I guess we're hoping to inspire. I mean, the college does have international connections. We have international programs office, so incoming students from multiple countries, as well as outbound trips for some of our students. As far as I know, and maybe Shannon can, you know, correct me, but I don't think there's any plan to necessarily seek international connections with this project, but I'd say that we're always willing to inspire and collaborate and learn from others outside of the country as well.
Fantastic. Did you have anything to add to that, Shannon?
I mean, Chris and I have done this. Chris and I and our colleague Kim have done a variation of this presentation multiple times at this point. So, you know, we have received questions about people wanting to do a similar project, but all within Canada. But you know, that being said, if anybody is interested in copying the format that we used or being, you know, taking inspiration from it, then we're happy to help them out.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I think I think all of our presenters and all of our Campus Living Labs members are happy to share some information. We actually have a workbook that I also just want to share where we've already started to populate some of those sort of like issues and questions that have come up in the peer knowledge sharing throughout the projects for cohort 1, 2, and part of cohort 3. So we've broken it down. So here's just the cover information. If you'd like to add your email and institution and project idea to our wish list for cohort 4, please go ahead. Letitia will add the link again in the chat. So yeah, so I can see Jordan's wondering about funding. So I don't know if that's specifically for CICan Impact Climate Project, but I can tell you we are currently seeking opportunity to fund cohort 4. We know that this is a very well-received project by our current funders. We always were intending to only fund 3 cohorts, but we are looking to expand to cohort 4. Gesundheit, Chris, based on the success of these projects, based on the sheer GHG reductions, the engagement aspect, and as Chris was mentioning, his greenhouse gas estimations are conservative. The numbers that we gave out for the totals were very conservative. They were based on conservative rounding down of everyone else's very conservative numbers. So, and that was only for the year in operation. So you can only imagine the true impact of the 2 cohorts that have completed, now in operation for almost 2.5 years. That the actual greenhouse gas reductions and awareness raising at this point is significantly higher. So we know that this is a great path forward. Another question that we really are interested in sort of examining is also the engagement of students, because this is also an area that can be really, really tricky. So does anyone have any insight? And please, before you leave, we do have a survey that we would like you all to fill in. So Letitia, why don't you put the survey on? And in the meantime, I would love it if we could just sort of discuss as a group How did you find engaging students? Bradie, did you want to go first again?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
It was challenging in some ways, just finding students that would come out and participate. However, we have a Taking Care of Mother Earth course that we're able to go into and talk to the students. So that was very helpful. We also have a Indigenous student circle that we were able to leverage them to contact students and meet with students, and go to their meetings. So we worked around it in a few different ways, but it wasn't a direct line. No, it was challenging to get students to participate.
It sounds like you did a really smart approach, though, by just coming at it from multiple approaches. So yeah, well done. I mean, it was very
absolutely
successful. So yeah, what about you, Volker?
Thank you.
Yeah, I touched on it earlier a little bit. We put on Cookie Day on Friday night in spring, and that really weeds out the people who are not interested in applied research or any of that kind of stuff. But the ones who do show up are more likely, at least, and we don't make any promises of additional, like that they can make any money or if they get credits or something like that. In the end, we did pay them a little bit, which I think is, and we continue to do so, because I think that's important, that, as SAS Polytech or any college, I feel like we shouldn't just take advantage of students who are willing to volunteer, even though they would do it for free. But then saying, look at us, college, doing this, if it's really just the students, that just doesn't feel right to me. And particularly now that the CICan funding is over, the project is still going. This is solely a volunteer effort on the students' side currently, and I think that's a good success story.
Thank you. Yeah, wonderful perspective. And yeah, you're not the only one. You're not the only project that found that sweetening the deal will bring out more students. So what about you, Shannon and Chris?
I think so. I work in student engagement, and it is often hard to get students to come and volunteer their time for these extracurricular projects. So what we did was we tried to engage with classrooms, with classes of students as much as possible. I think that's one of the reasons why we have such a high number of student engagement, is because the students came out as a part of their class. But I also noticed, and maybe this is because of the nature of the project, that we had a lot of student volunteers as well. And I think students and people in general are just really excited when it comes to planting things. They love to plant things. So anything to do with gardening or getting their hands in the soil, I tend to get more volunteers than usual. And we even did a marathon weeding session last week because the saplings were getting overgrown with giant weeds. And we even had students coming out to help with that. They found it very meditative and relaxing to weed in the garden. So yes, I think it really has to do more with the type of site and the type of project as opposed to the methods for engagement. But definitely encouraging for us to see that number of people showed up, and that maybe if we do something like that in the future, we'll get lots of participation.
Fantastic. Did you have anything to add to that, Chris?
I just want to concur with Shannon. The planting trees and gardening attracts people. People love to engage in anything that has to do with gardening and planting and things like that. So yeah, I was pleasantly surprised to see that many people showing up, and also that's all thanks to Shannon's coordination. But it's nice. It was nice to also engage and communicate and chat with the students who were there planting or more recently weeding the microforest and just enjoying their time there, just finding it peaceful and enjoying the activity itself.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually completely concur. Tree planting seems to connect people of all ages. So I feel like next time we do funding, regardless of the project, we'll say, and there has to be a tree planting component just to bring in the numbers to your project. I'm just joking, but I mean, it's food for thought, right? So I just really wanted to quickly say thanks for filling in the survey to everybody. Just if you have questions about this workbook, these are just kind of like a cheat sheet to help you get started. If you have questions or issues, this will kind of provide maybe some insight into how other projects dealt with those issues. It might even help you have a little bit of, preemptive problem solving before you get to that particular problem that you might be encountering in future. And oopsies, that's my desktop. Oh gosh, nope. Here we go. Sorry. I'm just going to finish up with a very quick announcement or two. Here we go. We have a new website that we're really excited to share with everybody. So if you're looking for any of our resources, past workshops, upcoming workshops, ways to be involved, reports, you can go to our new website. It's at www.impactclimate.ca. Letitia will add the link. And we also have another workshop coming up about how to integrate green credits into your courses, into your college. And this is with EcoCanada. It's integrating EcoCanada credits. So that'll be co-hosted with EcoCanada, and two members will be presenting on their experience. That'll be Sault College and SAIT. So please also don't forget to follow us on social media, hashtags. If you ever want to tag us, here they are. So a big thank you to everybody that presented today, and a big thank you to everyone that joined us. And just to our presenters, did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to leave our participants with today? Bradie, any final thoughts?
Just that the experience was really great from beginning to end, and having a focus really helped focus us in terms of, really creating a great space for folks. So without the funding, we wouldn't have been able to do what we've done and continue to do since then. It kind of opened our college's eyes as to what we can do and how far we can go. So it's been a fantastic opportunity.
Thank you. We love to hear that. It's been very wonderful working with you and your college. So thank you, Bradie. And what about you, Volker? Thank you.
Same thing. I think the CICan funding was a really, really great avenue to get this started. And again, because it was such a low tech project for us, we were able to hire Carrie as an expert. We were able to pay the students a little bit, right? And it's, I think, really, really a reasonable amount of effort that goes into this particular grant compared to others. I will say that.
We love to hear that because, yeah, we're trying to make this as easy as possible for all of you to do the climate action and the awareness raising. So thank you so much. It was wonderful working with you as well. And what about you, Shannon and Chris? Any final words?
So I'll say that I would echo what Bradie and Volker were saying. I think in addition to that, those monthly meetings that we had as well were a really important part of the project because we got to connect with other colleges and see what they were doing. And like everything that the Impact Climate Project does, it's like a lot of community building between the colleges, which I think is really amazing. So we were working on this project, but we also understood that we were working, in partnership with other colleges with similar goals. So it was a really nice, it added some extra value to the project as well, as opposed to just working, okay, you get the funds, you work on the project in isolation, and then you complete it. This was something that really felt like it was more of a larger picture.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Chris, did you have a final thought as well?
Sure, just echoing with everyone else has been saying, our project wouldn't be where it is and probably wouldn't exist, I think it's fair to say, without CICan. It was absolutely instrumental in getting this off the ground and catalyzing the energy, right? Mobilizing the energy of several people to get this project going. And I want to add just also maybe that I also really appreciated the meetings, as Shannon said, the monthly meetings, but also the meetings we were fortunate to attend, the CICan Connections Conference in Calgary and the National Indigenous Education Symposium in Regina back in the fall, that were extremely interesting in making connections with people from other institutions who are facing the same issues, the same questions, the same goals, from different perspectives and different environments. And that was, I really appreciated that. And I think that brought a lot of interesting things to our project. And I hope that we were also able, through our presentations there, to share useful knowledge that could be useful for other people. So thank you. Thank you, CICan.
Thank you. Thanks. And absolutely. We really enjoyed watching all of you share knowledge with each other and across the cohorts as well. So this has been wonderful. And thank you for presenting and sharing all your knowledge today. We really appreciate that all of you were able to do that. So thanks, Chris and Shannon. Thanks, Volker. Thanks, Bradie. And thanks to everyone that participated today, came out. We will share the workbook link, the recording, and the decks in the near future. So please keep an eye out for those, as well as keep an eye out for our volume 2 of our Campus Living Labs Best Practices Report. It's coming soon. Thank you, everyone. It was lovely to see our cohort 1 and 2 members again. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.